printed. So can math and computers really solve crimes, or can they aid in criminal investigations? We'll talk about a couple different ways in which math can help solve crimes. We'll start with a few ways that it's already kind of proven that math can help solve crimes. We'll talk about crash reconstruction, so accidents. Anytime there's a serious accident, when there's, especially when there's maybe a death involved, the accident reconstructionists are out there. And what are they doing? Well, they're collecting collision evidence. What are the final positions of the cars or the vehicles involved? Skid marks, measuring the skid marks, finding out, is it wet, is it dry, because that changes the coefficient of friction. Roadway markings, what sort of damage are there to vehicles? Damage to property. There's other evidence. Were there witnesses? What do the witnesses say? And again, that kind of adds into what Thorne said. If you have 3 witnesses, you're probably going to get 3 different stories. So you have to figure out, what's the more believable story. That adds in. Traffic control devices that might have been there, weather conditions, lighting issues. Well, how do you analyze all this once you collect all this data? Well, Newton's laws of motion. This is basic physics. You can determine the speed of a car generally based on the distance of the skid and the conditions of the road. And there's different techniques you can use. Damage-based and trajectory-based are two of the more popular. But there's computer programs out there now where you can go out to an accident scene, take pictures with the camera, upload those pictures to the program, and now the program will kind of 3D model the whole scene for you so that you can kind of attempt to reconstruct the accident in a perfect computer environment. Now again, you're not going to have all of the data. So this is just going to be a simulation of what may have occurred. You're never going to get the exact duplication of what occurred. But you may be able to tell, when, who's at fault. Where does this come into play? Well, there were 2 cases, again, in State College where I live, where this came directly into play. There were 3 guys that had left the bar. They were all, intoxicated, but not too intoxicated. Started crossing the street, and they were hit by a vehicle. First guy got killed. Second guy was seriously wounded, and the third guy was just missed. Accident reconstruction in this case proved that they determined how fast this guy was going, found that if he was driving the speed limit, he would not have hit any of these guys that were crossing the street. In this case, the guy was charged and found guilty of vehicular homicide. I found another case where someone was crossing the street hit by a vehicle. In this case, they found out that the driver was actually going under the speed limit, and that any reasonable driver in those conditions could not have stopped to hit the pedestrian. In this case, the driver was not charged with anything because it was truly an accident. So you see an example here of where accident reconstruction, or using math and computers, was the difference between a woman not being charged and another man being charged with vehicular homicide, where in both cases the victim was either seriously injured or killed. Image deblurring. You've seen this scene in Super Troopers. Enhance, enhance, enhance. Well, that's not, to be honest, that's really not too far from the truth. Image deblurring has come a long way. If you use a program like MATLAB, or there's all sorts of image enhancement or image deblurring programs out there. To deblur an image, you can't just take the image and plug it in and there's no magic deblurring algorithm. You have to know what causes the blurring. So what causes blurring? Well, you're either moving the camera while you're capturing the image, or something that you're capturing is moving. And if you can mathematically describe what is causing that blur, then you can apply that algorithm to deblur the image. So find a mathematical description of how the image was blurred, and then you can deblur it. This is an example that I found. This is a blurry picture of a woman's face. This image down here kind of will show you the deblurring process. and then the last image will actually show you the final picture. So, I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, to have an image like that fixed up that's a pretty good image deblurring here. So how can we apply this to crime? Well, say you saw again, these are other images that were actually deblurred. Say you, some camera on a street corner caught this, vehicle fleeing from the scene of a crime. Well, what can you tell me about that vehicle from that picture? It's probably white or light colored. Some sort of state. I mean, you can get some basic data. What if you had this picture? It's a taxi cab. It's got a clover leaf on the side. You can maybe even, so the exact cab company, by the advertisement on the roof, you may be able to determine the exact cab that was involved. I mean, so here's a case where image deblurring can really give you a lot of important information.
Excuse me.
Yes?
I've got a question. Can you talk at all about quality of deblurring? I think the examples you're giving here probably come from a stationary camera. Can you talk at all about how it is with PTZ cameras, or maybe you're not so sure where the camera is looking at a particular time?
Can you explain what you're asking? I'm not following.
Talk about the image deblurring. I didn't know if there was a difference between the type of cameras. In other words, if I mount a camera that's stationary on a building, it's not going to move, not going to the wind, versus if I have a PTZ security camera that could be rotating for 90 degrees.
Right.
What kind of image deblurring? You showed a really good example here.
Right. You're probably going to have to go frame by frame, so you may be able to extract individual frames from that image and then deblur them. Obviously I don't have any data on that, so I don't know.
You could do if you know the speed of the scanner in the camera, that would be your mathematical.
Well, yeah. If you can eliminate the panning going on, then that will also help that. Here's a very touchy subject, and I know Thorne will add on to this: deblurring fingerprints. So oftentimes you'll get a fingerprint and it's too blurry to find any minutia points to match. So can we use deblurring to fix up a fingerprint so it might actually provide some information? Well, by deblurring a fingerprint, are we adding non-existent details to the print that weren't already there? I mean, that would be now you're kind of almost fabricating evidence. So typically any enhancement of a fingerprint or otherwise has to be verifiable and duplicated by another expert in the field. And now we're talking about scientific evidence being admissible in court. For example, a polygraph examination is typically not admissible in court because it's not generally accepted. But some scientific techniques are admissible in court, and I know Frank will add some to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, having worked in the forensic lab where we're looking at fingerprints like this, some of the examiners I know will not even look at anything that has been put through any kind of image manipulation because they feel that it's so risky to themselves as an examiner and to potentially convicting someone. In court, fingerprint evidence is perceived as being very, very positive. But they don't want to put that themselves or the other people, the defendant, at risk of that kind of conviction. So they won't even look at this stuff. If they can't lift a print using dust or photograph it in blood or something like that, they're not even going to look at it. They just don't believe in this stuff anymore, right, at all.
And really the risk in crossing the line between enhancing the image and manipulating it is really dependent upon the tools that you're going to use. Your magic tool that's going to make the image perfect is probably going to cross the line. So particularly you'll see in fingerprint enhancement that you're talking about very small changes in enhancing the image. We'll also talk a little bit about fingerprint matching. So you've got a set of fingerprints and you're going to run them through AFIS, which is Automated Fingerprint Identification System. And the TV scene is, the detective walks over to the guy running the machine, they plug it in, and the guy's probably walking away when the match comes up on the screen, and the detective turns around, and boom, you've got your criminal found. Well, you'd be surprised, there's about 4 or 5 different major vendors of AFIS systems, and all these vendors use very different matching algorithms.